This interview is a part of the Oklahoma Historical Society's Oral History Program, Living Legends Collection. This interview was originally conducted on January the 12th, 1967. The interview is conducted by Mr. Guy Ross. The interviewee is Mrs. Sudye Lucas. This interview is being re-recorded on April the 5th, 1985 for inclusion in the permanent collections of the Oral History Program by Judith Michener.
This is Living Legend Library tape number 54. We're talking today to Mrs. Sudye Lucas. Ms. Lucas, why don't you go ahead?
We came to Oklahoma in 1902 from Hale, Missouri. Came by train, Rock Island to Union City. My father bought a farm, 160 acres.
Whereabouts was the farm?
9 miles east of Union.
9 miles east.
This farm had a 2-room house, one sod room and the other of lumber.
What was it like to sleep in a sod room? Was it?
Well, it was all right. There was a few things objectionable. We didn't have good screens. We had to fight the flies.
You did?
Yes.
Did the roof keep the rain out and everything?
Yes, it didn't leak.
Was it cold in the winter?
No, it was, well, we didn't live in it in the winter.
You
We came in the spring, and then our house was ready in about May or June of that year.
Oh.
We moved into our new house.
Oh.
We saw the famous Cheyenne Arapaho Country Run west of Union City. The 98th meridian was the boundary line. A big crowd came on horseback, carts, covered wagons, and any way to be there when the final shot was fired.
How old were you when you saw the run?
12.
12 years old. What was it like to? Did you go on the run?
Yes. We went out and watched the run. My
run.
father and mother and the boys, and we went in the wagon.
That must have really been something to see.
It was exciting.
How many people were there?
Oh, it was several hundred, I
There
guess.
were.
They struck out for the land. Some on horseback, some walked, some had carts, buggies, just any way to get over the line.
Were there any railroad lines running into that country where they could go on the train on the run?
Well, just a mile from there, the Rock Island, Union City, that was just east or west of Union City, about a mile.
Did it go into the Cheyenne Arapaho lands?
No, it went on south to Chickasha.
Went by them. Let me ask you something else. Could you sense? It seems to me that you'd be able to sense a feeling of competitiveness, if there is such a word, in the people.
Well, there was, yes.
Were they at each other's throats, or what?
Well, I guess it was a little later when they'd staked their claims. Well, there was lots of dissension and all because they'd claim they were there first. They'd put a stake down, you know.
Yeah.
And they'd have to find the cornerstones of the place. 160 acres it was.
Did they have a cornerstone at each corner, and then a rock, and then something in the middle?
No, I don't think there's anything in the middle. Just the cornerstones was rock.
I've always wondered how those people, when they made the run, would if one guy was on one side of the quarter and one was on the other, that they looked like they would have a big problem.
No, they just had to settle it among themselves some way.
Were there very many children there at the run?
Well, the children come with them, just like we did, you know.
Yeah.
Because there's no babysitters then.
Yeah, there's nobody to leave it.
Well, let's see, anyway, to be there when the first shot was fired. I believe it was on April the 22nd. Might have been the 12th. I just can't remember.
12th of April.
Uh-huh.
Do you have any idea how long the people would have gathered there before the run to...
Oh, they come the day or so before and kind of camped out and done the best they could, to be there, you know.
Yeah.
They come from Kansas and Texas and all around, all over the country.
Was the Army there to,
Yes, there was. There was some officers. I don't know just where they were from, but anyway, there was some soldiers stationed there at that time.
when the people lined up, did they just line up like they were
On
all
a
along
straight
a
line.
straight line?
Straight line.
It must have
along.
stretched out a long
Yes,
way.
it did. All up and down. It went clear to the Cherokee Strip. My brothers and I were too young to be eligible to make the run. In May, my father, Jim Lucas, began the building of a new house for us, a framed 7-room, 2-story house, which was one of the showplaces of that area and today still stands and in good repair. My 2 brothers and I walked 2 miles to a 1-room schoolhouse. Every quarter section, 160 acres of land, now owned by a family, and a big family at that.
I wanted to ask you about that. What kind of schools did they have then? Did they?
Oh, just a little, well, there was a schoolhouse every 3 miles, and everyone in that vicinity, 3 miles each way, come to that school.
There was one schoolhouse for every 3 miles.
Yes, every 3 miles.
Was it all? How far did the grades go?
To the 8th grade.
To the 8th grade.
Mhm.
What did you do when you got to the 8th grade?
Well, then we went to El Reno or wherever we could go, you know, to finish high school.
Oh.
Well, let's see, where was I? 160 acres of land. Was owned by a family, and a big family at that. The older folks, our mothers, would have quiltings and rag tackings for their carpets, which was woven by some well-to-do woman that could afford a loom or a weaving machine.
You mentioned when we were talking about this earlier how they did that. How did they do that?
Well, they'd have a machine, you know, and these rags would be on some kind of a thing that would slip through that. They'd go this way a yard and then back on a kind of a little shuttle, I think they called it.
If you had the equipment to do that with, you were a big person in the community, huh?
Yeah, they rated pretty high. The little Methodist church was organized, and our big house was a shopping place for the preachers. One of our preachers was very active and wanted to have a box supper all too often. He always wanted my mother to be forever baking pies, and what a promoter he was. Let's see. Here's the map. The Presbyterian Church, a few miles south of us, their specialists seemed to be singings on Sunday afternoon, and the young people would come for miles, most of them on horses, and the girls that could afford a side saddle and a long riding skirt was the belles of the country.
That must have been interesting times to see people coming
It
around
really
to
was.
come to those scenes.
Those days, I guess, are gone forever.
I guess that's where a lot of courting went on, too.
Oh,
They had
yes,
those singing,
yes. Certainly did. They all got married around there. Some of the young men had carts, 2-wheel carts, and some of the well-to-do had carts with backs to them. That was the last thing in elegance and showed prosperity.
Let me ask you something about those carts. You mean they were carts that
Just-
pulled by a horse?
Yes, just
And
2-wheel things. And then a little old seat up there. 2 people could ride in them, was all. And finally they brought them out with backs to them.
Oh, my. If you had a cart with a back to it,
Oh,
you were
my, you
driving a
really
Cadillac,
rated
huh?
some. You rated high then. Let's see. I guess now that's all. Now here's the last of it. I am now in my 89th year. I have no regrets for having lived that way. I had wonderful parents. They did their best for us. My recollection of that sod home is not painful, but a far cry from the very modern home that I have now, in a lovely location which excelled in the Christmas decoration, which I am sure many of you readers saw. I put readers, but
Yeah.
listeners
Well,
I should have put.
that's very interesting. That would be quite a contrast between the sod house then
Yes,
and this
and
beautiful
this house,
home
I
you have
think
now.
so too. Well, we've lived in several places in Oklahoma City. We first, when my husband and I came out here, we lived in Memphis when we come here. And we bought a house on 8th Street, a little 4-room bungalow. And we kept that, and then we bought up on Park Place, and we kept that a while too. And let's see, the next place I think, well, that is after Mr. Lucas died. I didn't want to live downstairs, so we had a 2-story duplex. And Francis and I moved up there. We moved upstairs. And he had just finished it before he died. And we rented the downstairs. And then we lived there till Francis married. And we moved into...
How long ago was that?
She married in 29. And we lived then in a 2-story house, white house on the end of the lot, which is now this duplex that I have to rent, one of them. And then we moved from there to 26th Street in a nice 2-story house near the Taft Stadium. And the traffic got so bad there that we came to Nichols Hills, and then from Nichols Hills up here. So we've lived around in this part of town.
Yeah.
In
You've
the
lived in several
northwest
several
all the time.
places, haven't you?
But we always owned our property. We never did rent.
I was when you talked about the sod house. How did they go about making a sod house?
Well, they just went out, and cut the sod some way or another in squares, or maybe a longer than it was wide, and just built it up some way. I don't hardly know how they did manipulate it.
Yeah.
But they were very strong and stood for years.
And it's still standing.
No, not that. No,
that was
but
the next.
new
That
house,
was the new house.
house.
New house.
I'm going out there someday and get a picture of it and take it over here to the Hall of Fame, the Cowboy Hall of Fame.
Oh, that'd
They
be.
said they'd be glad to have it.
Well, that'd be good.
So
That'd be great.
when Francis comes, I think I'll go out there.
Are people living in that house now?
Oh, yes. My father sold it and come to the city, and there's a nice family in there now. And the house looks just about like it did.
I'll
It's a
say.
2-story white house.
I'll
People used
say.
to drive by to see our house.
They did. Was the showplace of the?
Yes, it's a showplace of the area.
Well, that's marvelous. Well, I guess that ought to
Well,
cover
I'm
quite
glad
an
to give
interesting
it to you
period.
because I just scratched it off here just from my memory.
Well, we're so glad to have it.